You know, if there's one question I get asked more than any other, more even than what colour is your toothbrush, that question would have to be, Mark, does the Zeniko ZA12 flash carry enough brightness to shine a light into the dark corners of your calcified soul, or will it just get snuffed out by the nihilism of your cynical review? Well, today we're going to try and answer that question. I like getting free stuff, and first of all, let's get that PSA out of the way that I did not buy this flash, but it was sent to me by Zeniko in return for an honest review. They haven't seen this before it goes to air, so with that said, let's get that unboxing happening.
That.
Awooga.
So here it is, and well, it's a flash. Let's face it, this isn't a device I'm going to build some whole mythology around. I mean, it flashes in a wholesome, fill the room with light kind of way, rather than an open up my trench coat to passing pedestrians kind of way. This has certain features that you're either going to want or not, and lacks other features that you're either going to miss or not. In the end, buying a flash is like buying a camera itself, totally down to your personal preference and use case. And in some cases, that's actually going to be dependent on that camera, because what works with one camera might not work with another when it comes to the world of flashes. Let's take this flash as an example. My Nikon SP900 is my most powerful flash. It has everything. It supports Nikon's TTL system, which means it takes your camera settings and what it reads through the lens and uses them to calculate flash power. So it's foolproof. Well, up to a point. Nikon's TTL system isn't compatible with Canon's, isn't compatible with Panasonic's, and so on. Put it onto a different brand camera and you have to set it to manual, unless it's a Sony, which has a completely different hot shoe system altogether. Well, what that means typically is that you're going to end up sticking to one brand or buying a specific version from a company like Godox that is designed to be compatible with your model camera. Well, this flash completely does away with that. It's definitely not the most fully featured or the most powerful of flashes, but it's compatible across a broad range of systems. You do miss out on some cooler features. For example, Nikon's creative lighting system allows you to use an optical trigger, putting flashes into groups and adjusting their outputs for a multi-flash setup. But that's a faff, and one of the things about flashes is that as soon as you take the flash off the camera itself, you lose all the smarts in terms of calculating the exposure. It makes sense. If the flash doesn't know what it's focusing on or how close it is to the subject, you end up having to dial your settings in through trial and error anyway. Well, this little thing removes that completely. Firstly, it's a fully manual flash. If you want it to be, you can go from a 64th to full power, effectively doubling or halving the power as you turn the dial. Then it's usually just your best guess, setting your ISO, film speed and aperture manually and adjusting them to get a satisfactory image at what's usually the lowest effective power setting. So for example, here I'm setting my shutter speed to 125th. The first thing you're going to want to know is your camera's flash sync speed. That's the highest shutter speed you're going to be able to reliably use your flash at without getting dark banding at usually the top or the bottom of the image. The idea is that if the second shutter curtain starts closing before the first shutter curtain is fully open, you end up with what is effectively a letterbox swiping across the focal plane rather than having the whole image exposed at once. That's the science of it, but again, we're overcomplicating balancing things. Leaf shutters in lenses don't suffer the same issue, and the easiest thing to do is just work out the flash sync speed of your camera and make sure to stay at or below it. For the Nikon Z, that's around 200th of a second, so we can leave it at 125th. With my Leica M2, it's only around 1/40th of a second, marked with an X on the shutter dial. But like I said, once you set your shutter speed, you only need to change it if you're deliberately shooting long exposure to capture more of that ambient light. Let's keep things simple. So, trial and error, it's fine for digital since it doesn't cost anything if you're wasting frames and you can see the final image instantly. So what is full power on this thing? Well, you can tell a flash's power by the maximum guide number, which is usually a function of how many meters range it has at ISO 100. The instructions here are pretty silent about that statistic, but the indications you get are that the furthest you can shoot at ISO 100 is 3 meters, and that's if your aperture is set to f2. So definitely not the 41 meters that I get out of my Nikon SB900. But then we're comparing a P to a basketball here. In practical terms, if you look at this example, you can see that I'm shooting a bookcase just a few meters away with my lens set to f5.6, which is as wide as it goes at 50 millimeters, and you're already battling the output, and at f8 you're definitely underexposed, even at full power setting. If you're going to want to shoot distance, you either need a fast aperture or high ISO. That's just physics. But what about where you don't have the time to make adjustments or even gasp, what if you're shooting film where you won't even get to check the final result until you develop it? Well, that's where the Zeniko has a trump card. See this little black dot here? Back then they called it a thyristor, which sounds like some kind of ganglion or carbuncle, but put simply, you set your aperture and shutter speed on the dial and the flash will then sense how much light gets bounced off before cutting the power. So for example, if you set your shutter speed to the flash sync speed, your ISO to the film or ISO setting, and then you match the aperture to your camera, you should get a perfectly exposed shot. Well, that's the theory. Let's see how it works. Okay, so first what we're going to do is try and take some test shots digitally just to see how this thing holds up and to see whether the automatic setting on here is very accurate. What I'm doing is I'm putting my camera, my digital camera to manual, setting the ISO to a fixed 100, and what I'm then doing is setting the ISO on the flash to 100 as well. So I'm not going manual here, I'm going automatic, although really with digital I'd probably go manual and then adjust it on the fly. But this is a good way of sort of just dialing in, I think, the settings and seeing if we can get a decent shot when we come to shoot with analog. So first things first, we're going to take a picture of a clock. So let's try and capture it here from a couple of different angles. Firstly, from this angle, just looking oblique onto the clock itself, and then maybe I'll take another picture up the stairs. But the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to check whether this thing works. So at the moment, what it's saying is 125th, which is the flash synchronization speed of this camera, or at least one of them. I can't remember if it's 125th or 250, but 125th, I know I'm safe. I'm going to set it to the proposed aperture, so I'll set it to f8 because it's not very far away. It should be able to handle f8. And okay, well, you can't see that, but if you were to have a look, you'd see that actually, well, it's pretty dark. That's not something that surprises me. I have a thyristor flash that I use at home, and I tend to have to up the setting a little bit, just one stop. But I think maybe it's just being a little bit conservative, not putting too much light in there. Could make it really quite good as a kind of fill-in flash, I think, where you usually don't want a lot of power. You just want to sort of put a little kick into the scene. Yeah, that's too dark. So I guess the question is it because the flash just isn't powerful enough, or is it just not calibrated very well to the aperture? I think ultimately it could be the aperture, but let's see how we go if we up the aperture just one stop. So instead of f8, I'm now setting it to f5.6, 125th of a second again. All right, and that is definitely more pleasing. It is a signal. I'd still say it's a little bit underexposed, but I'm extremely comfortable with that for digital because at least it means that I won't be blowing out the highlights. So I think we're going to assume, let's take maybe just a couple more shots, but I think we're going to assume that we need to overexpose by one stop with this flash set to automatic. So we're still going f8 on here, 100 ISO. I'm setting it to f5.6. Look, let's try it at f8. It's certainly close enough, 125th of a second. Yeah, look, it's still dark. It's still that little bit dark. You can barely see it. Let's set it to 5.6. And again, that is just much better. Okay, let's go with that. All right, so we're back at the clock, now shooting with film using the Nikon N80, which is probably overkill for this, and it actually does have a built-in flash anyway, but we're gonna forget that that exists just for today. We've got our Zeniko on our hot shoe, and we have it set to 100 ISO, f8. Let's make sure that we've dialed in the same on the N80. I'm also using the Sigma 50mm f1.4 DGHSM lens, which is actually a pretty beautiful lens. Goes down to f1.4, so we probably don't even need flash in this bright room. But you know what? I'm gonna make it go down to 100 f11, and that means I'm actually going to shoot it at f8. (125th) f8, and let's go. I'll have to get back a bit, so it's a little bit further back. Well, it's shot. Manual f8. Okay. Now to have a look at a few other things around the house. Now in the dimly lit kitchen, let's try to immortalize a couple of items. Firstly, this kitchenette, but also this bookcase. I've taken pictures of this before and you've probably seen them before. Still, one of the things about the Zeniko is that because it's an auto flash, it actually calculates exposure by waiting till it's had enough reflected light from the surface of the object you're taking a photograph of to say, yeah, that's enough. Let's cut the flash power now. The problem happens, I think, when you're going to be doing something that's highly reflective or white like a shirt, then it's probably not going to be very accurate. This, I think, is going to reflect because it's glass and I'm going to shoot it straight on. Let's see how it handles it. F11, and I set mine to F8. Yep, 100th of a second. Should we go a little bit crazy? Hey, should we go a little bit crazy now and change the settings? All right, so I'm setting it for F8, which means that I'll actually shoot it at F5.6, still keeping 125th of a second. There we go. Let's do a couple of other things around the same area. F8 at 5.6. Oh, you ready for your close-up, Mr. DeMille? And now a gratuitous selfie. And surely we only have a couple of shots now. So maybe what we'll do is, if we do have two shots, we'll take two shots. The first one will be from the Zeniko flash, the second will be from the inbuilt flash, and we'll see if there's any difference. I expect them to be pretty similar actually. Come here. You're a gorgeous girl, aren't you? Are you going? Are you good? Are you good? Say hello to the world. Say hello to the world. Hey. Success. I mean, it's not like I needed to use an external flash on my Nikon N80, but it does show that if you have an old camera that doesn't have a flash, you've got a pretty good option with this little Zeniko. I'm particularly thinking about those old 70s rangefinders and SLRs that come with a hot shoe but don't have anything to light your scene. This will do the job, popping a bit of light into the void, taking just 1 to 2.5 seconds recycle time before you're ready to flash again. And that's fine for this type of device, certainly fast enough for snapshots. You won't be doing fancy strobe photography with this or shooting sports in the dark. I do like the dials too, maybe not the same feel or quality as a shutter dial on your Leica, but they make a satisfying click when you set the power, ISO or f-stop. At least you feel confident you're not going to nudge the settings accidentally. So now you can see where the true value of this flash comes from. It basically turns your film or digital camera into a classic flash point and shoot. Obviously, it's a bit conservative in its estimation, protecting the highlights at the risk of underexposure, and that probably makes a bit of sense with digital. With film too, I guess, where you've seen point and shoot party photos with people's faces blown out in the foreground. This is actually the perfect party flash. Something small and indiscreet and made for spontaneous moments with friends. Well, I don't really do spontaneous, come to think of it. I don't really have many friends either. But let's try and give it a more meaningful test. The campus where I work is closing down at the end of the year, and I want to capture it before they send in the demolishers and rezone it as overpriced residential houses or an aged care facility. So how about I do a few building interiors with it? So there you go. The flash can also be used for portraiture. Well, in a sense, it's more in-your-face Terry Richardson than Ann Geddes. Perfect for that on-camera look. It does come with this little diffuser that I haven't really used yet, but my experience of these things is that they don't really make a huge amount of difference. The flash is definitely not perfect. You could see how it fared in larger spaces, and the thing about on-camera flash is that, well, it's always going to look like on-camera flash, shooting hard light into the scene without grace or circumspection. And that's the point. You're not a professional real estate, event, or wedding photographer. If you are, what the hell are you doing watching a channel in which a not-so-gifted amateur is talking about inexpensive consumer electronics like the Zeniko ZA12? No, that does not mean that you can now click away. In fact, you have to like, share, and subscribe so that you can be tempted into the dark side of flawed photography. The rest of you, well, you already know what you were in for when you clicked on the thumbnail. So regardless, let me know your thoughts in the comments about whether this is a device that you can find a use for. It's certainly a neat little gizmo. I hadn't heard about Zeniko before they sent me this. I'm assuming that I'm pronouncing their name correctly. That line beneath the zero is a bit confusing. If it was on top, it would be a macron and I would be elongating my vowels like Tokyo. But that one is on the bottom. More of a sarkozy than a macron, so I'm guessing it's just a stylish affectation. Zeniko's only crime being to graphic design and in giving me a free flash so I can share my experiences with you. And as for that experience, well, it is a product for a specific purpose, and that purpose, honestly, is fun. I can't ask it to bounce. I can't ask it to be more powerful. I do have one request though, and that's that in the next version, Zeniko put a PC sync connection on this device. It's great for just about any camera with a hot shoe, but my Leica doesn't have that, so it needs, well, just one of these. For the Zeniko, that means I have to use another accessory to be able to connect my flash to a hot shoe. And well, actually, now you think about it, that just propels me into a world of off-camera flash and my ability to get maybe a little bit more creative with my lighting. Something to consider for next time. Later.